Hello, today we're at the Schenectady County Historical Society and we are conducting an interview with former Schenectady County Historical Society trustee Frank Taormina. The date is May 14th, 2016, and the time is 12 p.m. My name is Mike Maloney. I'm the librarian and archivist for the Grems-Doolittle Library, and I am here with library volunteer Paul Contarino. Let me check that out. So Frank, we're just going to ask you a few questions about the origin of the Grems-Doolittle Library at the Schenectady County Historical Society. And so we're just wondering how you first became involved with the Schenectady County Historical Society.
Well, I think the initial attraction was because my wife loved antiques. So she came down here and began, looking at the stuff that they had down here, was quite excited by it. And then at that point in my life, I had been retired. This was circa 1980, and I had written a little biography of Philip Schuyler, which I think you've got a copy of here now. But at any rate, I became involved and wound up on the board of trustees, and became active in the society. But mainly because I just enjoy historical stuff. I love to look these things up. The thing that got me involved in the library was, I think that there's several people whose names I'd like to make sure you record here. Certainly Jim Pontius is one, and Mandy Grems. Now, Jim, my perception of things was that Jim was a trustee here, as Mandy was, and Jim was the one who suggested to Mandy the idea that she might want to contribute to the library, and I know he played a very important role in bringing that event about. And then she made the contribution of $50,000, and then we, in turn, as trustees, agreed to match that money. Now, one of the peculiar little things that happened was that, for reasons which I can't remember why, but Jim became annoyed with something that was going on and left. And when he left the board of trustees, somehow the responsibility for raising the money fell on me. I don't know how that happened because I'm not much of a money raiser. But at any rate, we continued our effort to raise the money simply by asking members for contributions and asking members of the board. And eventually we were able to match the amount of money that Mandy gave us. And we hired Cullen, you mentioned that, to build the library for us. Now, a couple of people who played very important roles in this whose names should not be forgotten: Scott Hefner and Elsie Maddox. Elsie was the librarian here when this library first opened, but she had acted as the librarian in the Historical Society building as well. I think that the reason that Cullen wound up as the contractor who built the library was because it seems to me that he was the guy who also built the Vroman Room. Yeah. And people were very happy with his work on the Vroman Room, so they hired him to build the library. Elsie Maddox played a big role in that. Scott Hefner was very active too. The guy who stands out in my mind absolutely is John Hancock. When this library was being built, I used to kiddingly refer to John Hancock as the clerk of the works because he was here all the time. And to the extent that there were any details in the actual construction of the library, where things were placed and how they came out, I'm pretty sure that it was more John's decisions on what to do than anybody else's. I think that he played a role in for instance, in the creation of this window that looks over the Mohawk River. But Jim Pontius, Mandy Grems, John Hancock, Scott Hefner, and Elsie Maddox as the first librarian. Elsie was a very, very, very active person. And when the library was built and first organized, she's the one that did most of the work in deciding where things were going to be placed and how they were going to be placed. Now, there was something about this window behind me, and I think that Mandy had something to do with that. I guess, I used to think to myself, we should be eternally grateful to her every time we sit back there.
Yeah, I guess
and
there's
look, and look out on the river and see what a beautiful sight it is. My approach for what happened, as I said, Jim Pontius was going to raise the rest of the money. Then something happened. I don't know what it was, but it was a matter of considerable annoyance to him. And during a trustees meeting, someone said something that he didn't like, and he got up and left. And that somehow or other, the responsibility devolved on me, but it was just I really didn't do anything spectacular. I just asked the members of the board to make contributions. And then, of course, I think if you looked in the record, there was probably a good deal of correspondence to the members of the society soliciting funds. But we were very fortunate to be dealt with so generously, and we were able to raise the money to bring the project to a conclusion. The fundraising part of it was just, I don't think there was anything more to it than simply, talking to people, asking them for contributions. And they were very generous enough so that we got the place built. As far as this question you've got, the challenges we faced were, of course, raising the money, but we were fortunate in that people were willing to contribute.
Right.
Describe my relationship with fellow member and archives members. I never had any problems. It was always very pleasant. And my recollection of it was that it went quite smoothly.
Oh, Frank, do you mind if I interrupt?
Sure.
What was the library like before this was built? Because I haven't really seen any pictures of previous.
Well, it was, when you go into the main building of the Historical Society, the Jackson House, the two rooms in the back as you enter the front door that would be on your left,
Okay.
that's where the library was.
Right.
And that's where Elsie held forth. But, it was, in a way, it was kind of a joke because there was so little space there for anything. That whatever books we had were there, but there wasn't a heck of a lot of stuff there.
Right.
There were some interesting things, old books and stuff like that, but it wasn't until this place was built that we expanded the collection to the point where it is now. Well, look at all the stuff you've got in the files here.
Yeah.
That did not exist
Right.
at that time. So it was referred to as a library, but it really wasn't much of a library, It's just, people would come here and hang out. I enjoyed it. I liked being here. And I thought I would certainly place a lot of emphasis on the role that Elsie played in helping to bring this all about. She's the gal. She's the person that you should be talking to, because she knows a lot more about what actually took place on a day-to-day basis than I do. Elsie, John Hancock is no longer with us, but I just couldn't tell you how much time and energy he put into this project. He was here all the time. As I said, I referred to him as the clerk of the works because it wasn't like nobody was paying him to do this. He was just a very conscientious, hardworking kind of a guy.
So back to your relationship with the Library and Archives Committee members.
Right. my relationship with them was always good. I mean, I didn't really sense at any time, any kind of, real tension or real problems coming into the situation. I think that, as I said, we were fortunate in having a number of people who were quite generous in supporting the project, so that made it, and brought it about.
And there were a lot of newsletters too about the ongoing
Right.
efforts for the library as well.
I don't know, I probably wrote some of the stuff.
Yes, I've noted, and you were also you also became president.
I became
Yeah, you
president
were also around
for a while,
1987.
Right, right. I spent a lot of time
Yeah.
down here. It was, I've always enjoyed this place, so that's a fortunate thing in my life.
Yeah, how did the committee arrive at a final design for the library that balanced the needs of the Historical Society while fitting into the scheme of the Stockade Historic District?
Well, my recollection of that situation is that, and I could be wrong about this, but I think that once John Hancock stepped in and kind of took over in this position of leadership, I don't think that we as a committee had a great deal to say about how the place was going to be designed. I think we left that to a considerable extent up to John.
Right.
And I think that John, I do remember one occasion, and I don't remember the cause of it, but we were going through the process of getting this place built, and the way this thing was handled, they had a blueprint of the library that was on a stand, and it was out in the room on the left. As we're looking at it, it would be the room on the left. And the stand was out there, and I don't know what happened, but something happened to disturb John, and he got very upset, and he went out there, and he had a pencil or a pen or something, and he scribbled all over the thing and tore it up because he thought it wasn't going to come to fruition. Well, it turned out that he wasn't, that he had misjudged the situation,
Right.
and things turned out all right, so we were able to complete the library. I think with fundraising, there are always some bumps in the road. I mean, you never quite get everything you want all the time. But we did get enough money to bring the project to a completion. And then, after we had raised enough money to match Mandy's initial gift, she gave an additional gift. So that she was really, I mean, it certainly is appropriate that the place is called the Grems-Doolittle Library, because she was the one that made the whole thing possible.
And overall, was the Board of Trustees supportive of the committee's efforts?
Oh, I think so, yeah, right. I mean, I don't think that there was ever a time when, there was any real, I mean, I don't remember ever being in a situation where somebody said, we've done the wrong thing, let's go back. And I think that, frankly, I think it was the fact that Mandy, she put up 50 grand. I mean, and once that money was in the possession of the society, it certainly kind of there's an element of compulsion there when you do something like that.
Yeah.
Everybody else looks up and says, "Well, God, if she put up $50,000, who am I to complain?" So here's my $100 or my whatever it was. I mean, you probably have a list someplace of all the contributions
Yes, I believe we do. Yes.
that were made at the time, and some people were, contributed substantially more than others. I remember making a contribution myself. You asked when the library officially opened on 10/12/9 or so, my initial thoughts. Well, my first initial thought was, I was so, there were a lot of bumps in the road along the way, and I was just so glad that it was here. And I just kind of looked around and marveled at the place, and felt really a great deal of gratitude for the efforts that have been made by, for Mandy's gift, for the efforts, for the initial move that was made by Jim Pontius, because I think Jim deserves a lot of credit, even though he, whatever it was that caused him to break off his relationship. I don't remember the circumstance enough. I just know that he ended it. But he did play a big role in helping to bring this about. And Mandy, of course, and Elsie Maddox's role. Scott Hefner was involved in this too, to a degree. You might want to talk to him sometime, because I'm sure he could give you a lot of important information.
Was there ever a time where you felt that the project would never come to fruition? That any gigantic obstacles?
Because you had mentioned there were a few, bumps along the way.
Yeah. I really don't recall thinking at any time, well, the project has come to fruition, so probably I have erased any doubts that I might have had at the time from my mind. But I mean, I don't remember along the way feeling at any time that we weren't going to make it. And I'm probably wrong about that. They're probably, when you think about getting a gift like Mandy gave us and then raising the money to match it, I would have to look back in the record to see who gave what, when, I think that might be an interesting thing to do. But, obviously, it turned out all right, so that's...
Yeah. Now, you've seen the library evolve over the span of almost
Sure.
25 years. What do you think about the library today?
Well, I spend enough time here, so I really enjoy coming down here and dabbling in all the stuff that's on the shelves, and I'm just kind of, fascinated by all this historical stuff, so that the experience I had yesterday of going through this file that you've got on Terrace was a good example of what for me is something that I really enjoy doing.
Yeah.
I have a very positive feeling about this place. I like it the way it is. I like the way you guys have put it together and the way you're running it. I think that you've managed to, people like Carol and others over a period of time have managed to collect enough stuff so that old guys like me can sit down here and amuse themselves forever by just going to the shelf, just like I did right now, and taking a book off the shelf and reading about. I was reading about my hometown down in the Hudson Valley, Marlboro. But there are so many other things that are really good. Just the family file part of it, I haven't. I was going to look. I will go back and check again. I'd like to see if I can find some information about the Schaefer family. And the building where I live is called Schaefer Heights. And I thought that I've done a little program on him, but I would like to learn more about Henry Schaefer, who was a very successful businessman locally. And made the library at Union College is called
Right.
the Schaefer Library because he was a guy who made the major gift which helped create that library. And he did so many other things locally to alter the state of things and make things better for everybody here in Schenectady.
Is there anything we missed, Paul, or anything else that you'd like to ask?
So what kind of a person was Jim Pontius?
Well, number one, he was extremely intelligent. I mean, if you were looking for a smart guy, he was it. And I got to know him a little bit because when I started teaching at Van Antwerp School in 1955, his daughter, Jan Pontius, was one of the members of the class that I taught in the 7th grade. And Jan Pontius was, well, if she wasn't the smartest kid in the class, she was, she was extremely bright. And then her parents, Jim was a very, very smart guy, and his wife, I think I mentioned this to you before, if you look on the bookshelf here, you'll find a history of the First Reformed Church that was written by Kay Pontius. So you have these two people, Kay and Jim, both of whom were very bright, and the daughter, whom I knew, Jan, was also very bright. But Jim was also, in addition to being a very intelligent guy, once he made up his mind about how things were going to be, his expectation was that people were going to follow a certain set of directions, and if anybody disagreed with him, he wasn't a very patient guy. I mean, I think that the fact that he left this project at the time that he did demonstrates that. And I don't know exactly why he left it, but there was something going on, and somebody raised a question, and it really he was something he found very, very disagreeable. So he just was in the room right next door to us that we were having a trustees meeting. It was at that meeting, and I can remember being at the meeting when he just, whatever it was that people said that he disagreed with, he got up and left. Just bailed out completely, And I think what's too bad about that, in my opinion, as I think I've repeated over and over again, is that he played a big role in helping to bring this all about.
Right.
And it was too bad that kind of thing had to occur, that it did occur, because he really, without him, I don't know whether Andy would have made the contribution or not. I have no way of knowing that. But I know that he had a great deal to do with her decision to make the contribution.
And John Hancock, what kind of a person was he? Since you said he was basically the person that was.
Oh, God, he was a very persistent guy. I mean, as I said, he was here all the time it was being built. As a matter of fact, I think if you look at the building and the way it's all put together, I'm sure the contractor, Cullen, had a lot to do with that, but I also think that John did. As I mentioned to you once before, one of the things that many of us had hoped would happen was that we would have an elevator here so that it would be easy to move stuff from this floor to the basement, up and down. You wouldn't have to carry it up the stairs. But that elevator never came to fruition, and my recollection is that it didn't happen because John was so close to the project and to offering suggestions about how to build what and how to put what where, that John just dismissed the idea of an elevator as being something that we couldn't afford. That whatever the amount of money was, we had gotten to the point where we had enough to complete the project. And if we had decided to put an elevator in, I think it kind of wears you out when you're doing something like this and looking for the resources to finish it. And you think you're almost at an end, and then somebody comes along and says, well, why don't we spend another $25,000 to put in an elevator? I know that John's reaction would have been, I mean, he was, let's just say that my recollection of him was that he was a person who had opinions and held them quite strongly. But he was also a guy who, he delivered the goods. I mean, he was here more so than anybody else. I mean, I don't think you could you could justly measure the value of his contribution to the construction of his place, because he was here all the time. And my guess is that if you look around, and I don't know exactly where to look for this, but that there are things here that occurred and are the way they are because John made these suggestions to the contractor, Cullen. Is Cullen still around?
Oh, I'm not sure about that. We'll have to look into that.
I mean, he'd be a good guy to talk to.
Mhm.
As I said, the person I think you ought to talk to is Elsie Mattis. I mean, she knows a lot more about what happened here than I do, because she was the librarian. And she was the person who, when we first opened the place, played the biggest role in organizing it and, deciding where the shelves would be and where the books would be and all that kind of stuff. And Elsie would probably remember a lot of details about who did what at the time that I had forgotten or just didn't know. What we ought to do is invite Elsie to lunch.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's a great idea.
Hey, Carol,
Yeah,
think you could call Elsie up and ask her if she wants to go to lunch?
today?
Well, not today, but, sometime in the near future at her convenience.
Well, yeah, or Mike could call her. She's never met Mike, so,
Oh, that'd be great, yeah.
Yeah,
Sure.
we'll have to take her out to lunch someday then.
I think I'll take you both out to lunch. And I could include Carol and Paul. I mean, I have
I'm not sure she's still driving. So that might take a little maneuvering.
well, we could drive out
Pick her
together.
up. Yeah.
We
Well,
could pick
that's
her up.
true. Go
Yeah.
get her.
And I guess Mandy Grems, a bit about what she was like.
Well, she was unique in the sense that, you got to remember that we're talking about, the 19th century, the 20th century. What am I thinking about? But I mean, she was like a woman engineer working for GE, and in that sense, there weren't many women who were doing the kinds of things that she was doing. So
Right.
that was kind of an extraordinary thing for her to be playing that sort of a role. But I am inclined to think that she was like one of those kids in school who was, really terrific in mathematics and really, really very, very good at solving problems, all the practical problems, but at the same time, doesn't find it easy to socialize. Although Mandy, I had this memory of coming to the Historical Society one day, and out in front of the building, at the foot of the steps, there is Mandy seated on the sidewalk in the summertime, and she's pulling weeds from between the cracks in the sidewalk. But that's the kind of person she was. She was a very, very hard-working person. She was a single woman, for one thing. And maybe that tells you something about her, personality-wise. But she and Jim had a very good relationship. But I don't think she was an easygoing, affable kind of person that you would find it easy to talk with all the time. She was not just she was unpleasant. I mean, I think that my impression of her was that she was the sort of person who had opinions, and she held to those opinions, but there again, I mean, the very fact that she was generous enough to make the contribution and make such a huge difference in the lives of everybody since then, gosh, you gotta give her a lot of credit for that.
Right. Well, anything else, Paul, that you can think of?
Not at the moment.
Well, thank you very much, Frank.
Oh, you're welcome.
Because there's a lot of the people, you're like one of the few people that are still left from that whole time, because we're talking over 30 years
Yeah,
ago.
that's me and the Grems up there.
Well,
We'll get a picture of her. Yeah.
that occurred to me. I mean, I gotta tell you, I was a little startled when that thought popped into my mind.
Right.
I thought to myself, my God, all this stuff was done, all this place was opened in 1981, and, that period of time from the 1980s into 1991, when I was here on the trustees and active in the society, I mean, how many people are left were here at that time? I don't know.
There was that one article with Randy Grems at the time when she gave the contribution, she was 71.
Right.
Yeah.
That's like 1985, 1986.
Yeah.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, she was certainly, to meet her, you'd say, oh, there's a little old lady here. That's what she was, a little old lady. She was a pretty energetic person, but and I don't know exactly what she did at GE, but I do know that her role as a woman in engineering was really unique.
Right, because that would have been the 60s and 70s,
Oh, yeah.
and part of the 50s. I imagine.
50s, 60s, 70s,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, that's
Yeah, because
something
she'd be older than I am, so that, I mean, I think if you're turning the clock back to that time, well, it seems to me as though a lot of things have changed in the course of my lifetime, particularly with respect to sex and race. And I don't think that if you go back to 1950, that you would find many women who were engineers. Because generally speaking, at that particular point in time, if you were a girl and you were studying in a college someplace and you decided to take engineering, you would encounter a lot of people who would say, are you crazy? Engineering, that's not a woman's profession.
Right.
Or things are different today.
Yeah.
So when Randy became an engineer to play the role that she did, it was really unique.
Yeah, definitely.
And I don't know where you'd find out more about what she did. Jim's daughter, Jan, is still alive, but she and her husband, I think, live down in Virginia.
Oh,
now.
yeah.
And Jan would be a good one to talk to, because she'd know a lot about it. But certainly talk to Elsie.
Yeah.
I mean, I think Elsie can give you a lot better information than I have.
Right.
Well, you've given us a lot of information, though, too.
And a lot of good information.
Well,
Yeah, but you were able to garner all the funding, because at that point when we got to us in about 1990, of course, with any, the projected construction cost and when the actual, it's like, sometimes there's quite a bit of a
Yeah.
discrepancy.
Yeah, yeah.
well, I'm sure it wasn't easy, and as I said, bumps in the road, to use that metaphor. I think that, but we managed to get what we needed,
Right.
and Mandy's generosity made all the difference. But look at what we got. This is a great place. This library, I love it here.
Well, yeah, once again, Frank, thank you for,
Oh, you're
for doing
welcome.
this.
It's quite all right. Thanks for the invitation.
Yeah, so this was an interview with former trustee and president of the Schenectady County Historical Society, Frank Taormina.
It's funny. I became president of the society because Giebel, that was the guy's name. Roy Giebel was the president of the Historical Society. And when he became president, they always need somebody to be the vice president, right? So somebody comes along and says, hey, why don't you be the vice president? So you figure, well, what the hell, I'm the vice president. So we were having a trustees meeting in the house, in the Roman room. And I have forgotten exactly what the issue was. But in the middle of the conversation that was going on, Roy, who was apt to be kind of quick-tempered, somebody said something to Roy, or made a suggestion to Roy that he didn't like at all. And with that, he stood up and left. He just flat out left the organization. He left not only the meeting, but he left the organization. And I became the president. Just in the snap of a finger. It was something that I hadn't anticipated at all. I mean, and he was just a very bright, capable guy, but also kind of, well, a little bit the same way as I mentioned about Jim Pontius before, I mean, he had his opinions and his ideas about how things were supposed to be done, and if they weren't done that way, well, he just wouldn't tolerate, the circumstances that he felt were not right.
Right.
So he got up and left, and I became the president of the Historical Society in an instant. But I think I ran for president after that, and then who followed me as president? Was it Ruth Ann?
I think it was Ruth Ann.
Yeah.
I can double check the
Right.
record for that.
But Ruth Ann played a big role here.
Oh, what kind of role did she play?
Well, she of course, her experience as a librarian, no doubt, helped with the organization and the creation of this place. But then she was just kind of a steady person. She ran all the meetings, and she served several terms as president. And she kind of, well, she's the kind of person who, when you put her in that role, she plays it in a way which kind of holds things together and keeps going in the right direction.
Right.
And that makes a big difference, as contrasted with, well, I mentioned, I don't want to say anything bad about Roy Giebel, but I mean, he just, if things weren't going the way he wanted them to go, he just wasn't, he was not a very tolerant person, And when that happens in an organization, I mean, things can, get pretty tough.
Yeah.
But Ruth Ann wasn't that way at all. I mean, she was a very steady hand on everything she did. Well, she was a librarian at Union for
Oh, yeah.
a long, long time, yeah. I knew her before I got to the Historical Society. I mean, because I used to use the library at the college and met her down there many times. But you guys are keeping this place together and keeping it going. That's great,
Yeah,
Mike.
thank you. We have some great volunteers that, take care of the place when I'm out, and we really couldn't do it without them.
Well, you're right about, I mean, you're right. You're fortunate in having the
Yeah.
kinds of volunteers you have.
Definitely. Yeah, they help me immensely run the place and get projects done that I could never do by myself, so.
Well, but you've done a great job with the collection, though. I mean, over a period of time, you've put together a lot of stuff that I think is
So
very
there's a whole
interesting.
bunch of pictures and blueprints just from John Hancock stuff that we'll be going through
Right.
as well.
Right.
Is that right? You're going to have some?
There's like a whole bunch, there's just a whole bunch of stuff that's not even been, I don't think, added to the collection yet. It's just been put in
Wow.
a box. So.
Yeah.
I'd love to see some of that stuff, too.
Yeah, we can bring some of it out for you.
I have it like
Yeah.
right over.
Yeah, do it today.
Yeah, I've got some stuff. Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah,
Yeah.
well, what you're looking at is the kind of thing that John to a greater extent than any of the rest of us. This is the stuff he paid attention to, the blueprints. Well, he was an engineer.
He worked over at GE too?
Beg your pardon?
Did he work over at GE?
Yeah, he worked at GE.
Probably him and Mandy had become.
They probably knew each other from the,
Very cool.
They had before they
oh yeah, before they built the library.
Here's some stuff. Have a look.
Oh my gosh, look at that. There's the, wow. Well, this is before they put the foundation in, isn't it? Holy
Oh, it looks like
mackerel.
it, yeah.
Wow.
The old 1 hour photo. And now these days that's like ancient history.
Yeah.
But at that point that was like cutting edge.
I know.
Boy, these are great photos.
Yeah.